just aware of how tender it is, and just the whole process of writing about this, and Katie's willingness to sit here and be willing to support you in this, and just to also, there's the personal drama, and there's the collective drama for many families and many, even in the group, the people, adoptive families and children, and there's a community around adoption and around a sense of, I remember Mary Watkins, who was one of my mother mentors, talking about the kind of, even the birth stories around adoption, like the story of the name, take on a sort of psycho-spiritual meaning as birth does. The mystery of birth and the magic of birth is also surrounds the magic of adoption, and the sense of the rightness of it, the sense of the destiny of it, not the randomness of it, that there's some profound rightness of it, finding each other. So I think that the journeys are individual, they're spiritual, psychological, of all kinds, and this is one journey, but there are many, and each of us has a different experience of the journey. I think, one of the things that happened also when this book came out was Kay Johnson came out with her book, which was quite an amazing study of actually the impact of the one-child policy and on families in China. And when we were adopting, there was a very strong sense that the stories of the birth families were not known. We knew there was a one-child policy. We knew that boys were not necessarily preferred, but were necessary in the social system of rural China, and that a one-child policy made it very difficult for, especially a family that already had one child and was paying a lot of money to have a second, when a second one was a girl and not a boy. It put families into horrible situations of having to abandon those children or try to make arrangements for them to live undocumented in China. But anyway, this wonderful sociologist whose adoptive mother, Kay Johnson, interviewed thousands of families, and her book came out almost at the time the one-child policy was abolished in China. And the stories of the families and the agony that it created for families socially, psychologically, just which makes total sense. But I think we knew nothing of that, and you made that, and it's a human story, a human story about trying to make sense of the unknown, imagining into creating a family. I remember the night before we met you, Katie, in China, we went to a Buddhist temple. I'm a Buddhist, so I remember Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion with 100 arms, and I made this huge connection with her, and I've been wearing a Kuan Yin ever since. But the sense I had was, this is the other mother. This is this Buddhist goddess who has always stood in for me, for the birth mother, and for that kind of sense of co-mothering, of sharingness, and of the connectedness that with the unknown, and how profound that connection is without knowing it. So for me, that was sort of my way of making this story real and alive, and I, still close to my heart. And the sense of that destiny, that connectedness, and the not knowing, and beyond the personal, the biological, the social, the national differences, all of it, that making a family in those differences. And always, for me, felt like a very special way to make a family. We would always say, being a bio mother is easy. And there's just always something very, very mysterious, special, deeply meaningful to me about making family in this way. So. What's it like to have it be a character?
I don't know if, Dad, you were going to talk about my inclusion of your choice to use my name as the character.
Do you want me to tell the story, or do you want to tell the story?
I mean, I guess it kind of goes both ways. It's something that you, I guess, had approached me about a long time ago. For how many years the character's name was Jilly, I think instead.
Jilly.
So when you read us drafts, it was always Jilly, and can't remember the parents' names used to be. But it was many years ago. But that's always kind of how this book was in my head, as you know, it's the story of Jilly and her family, and then
who were not. And the parents were never very much like.
Yeah, it was much more like objective, like kind of your fiction books. And then I don't remember when it was. It was about a year ago. I think you came to me and you asked me, what are your thoughts about having your name be in the book? And you've based characters on me and Mom before in the past, and we've always been like very heavily disguised, and there's been layers of other personality traits and different names, and it's very hard to discern through all the layers who you're talking about unless you know our family very intimately. And so I think for that reason it was I took a day, I think, or two to think about it, because you've never really asked me that question before, and I've always understood your reason for having kind of that secrecy around it. But in this case, because this is really truly like our story, I felt like it kind of was silly to try to hide it for that exact same reason. I thought, if this book's just going to be out there in circulation, any random person that walks into a bookstore and picks this up, they're not going to know it's about our family. They're just going to think it's a story made up about some family that you maybe know. But people who know us, they're going to tell right immediately, no matter what you call this kid, they're going to know who it is. So it doesn't make any sense to hide it. So I guess might as well be open about it.
But you say if they don't know me, it doesn't matter. If they do, they'll know anyway. So.
Yeah, they'll know half of these stories in this book anyway.
Shem, why did you change your mind about the name?
No, well, we have slightly different. We did a father-daughter dinner at Legal Seafoods, which we do quite often, and always have wonderful conversations there. And I had said to Katie, you got to read this book because it's coming out, and a lot of the stuff is similar to your early years. And so that's when the way I remember it is, you said, yeah. You'd read it, and you said, I don't think this is exactly what you said. I don't think Jilly is a Chinese name. That's what you said. And I said, what? Jilly isn't a Chinese name. I know Jilly isn't a Chinese name. And then you said, well, I'm not sure that's the right name. So I'm thinking, what in the world is she doing here? And all of a sudden I got it. I said, well, do you think, is there another name you think it should be? He says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you don't think maybe I should call her Katie, do you? He said, well, it's up to you. And then Katie, you have such a wonderful Zen-like quality. And I did the whole thing explaining, this and that. And she said, well, people who know me, they're already going to know. And people who don't know me, what do I care? So it was similar in the end. But you were very subtle, very good about it.
I've lived with being a partial character in novels for a long time. And it's very strange because there are things that are autobiographical and then they're not. So it's kind of
How do you think I feel? Writing about
you write
yourself.
Yeah.
I will say that was the weirdest part of reading the book and going through was having a character written about you by someone else who knows you very well, to the point where in the book you're in my head as my character, which is weird, especially as we are going through events that I did live through. I'm thinking back in my head. I always kind of compare it to putting two pieces of tracing paper over each other. In my mind when I'm reading a book, I'm thinking about my memories of this certain event, but it's also comparing it to what I'm reading in front of me and how well do they line up? Are they perfect, or are there certain parts that kind of stick out? So on top of that, I have to grapple with on top of, and my dad's also going to comment for me on what's going on in this situation, whether or not it's what I would actually think or say. I'm a 10-year-old me, So.
Can I ask you another question? In reading the book, this is a little unformed, but I'll get there. In reading the book, was there anything, because it's your life, right? A version of your life, a variation on the theme. Is there any sort of central feeling you had about it, about an event in it, about a theme in it, about, you know, whether it's identity or acceptance or China, or is there anything that just sort of went here? The answer could be no, but
I mean, I think there definitely was. I think there were a few different ones. I think there wasn't just one underlying theme that kind of wrote out the whole process. There's definitely a lot of emotion in there. I mean, there's a lot of emotion in the writing. I think it was kind of eye-opening for me to kind of hear from your perspective, like what your take on these events were and what your thoughts might have been about this potential hypothetical. You know, it's something I never think about as the person who is the adoptee. What is it like for the adopters? You know, what are the thoughts and the fears that go through your heads of, oh my God, what if this woman does want to take her child back? What do I say? Like, what do I do? So that was definitely a learning experience for me to see that and understand that. You know, and I think it was kind of an identity thing for me as well as again, as an adoptee, where I think definitely a lot, I mean, Adam, you could probably chime in about this, I think a lot in the media and, you know, other fiction pieces out there, there's a lot of emphasis on when there's an adopted person, there's always that feeling of loss, of, oh, I'm not whole, I need to find that other part of myself, I need to find where I came from. There's always that, you know, that character that's searching for that. You know, what comes to my mind immediately is that musical Mamma Mia, where the girl is like, I need to find my dad. If I don't find my dad, I can't go on with my life. You know, I can't move forward. And that always kind of has like been weird, sat weird with me, because I mean, maybe just as an individual person, I've never felt that in my life. I've never grown up feeling like I'm not whole. I need to know the answer to this question. I've always just kind of accepted it as, this is my unique story, and this is my family. So I've never really felt that, but I don't know. I mean, I know there are definitely Chinese adoptees and other adopted kids out there that do feel that sense of loss, but I think that definitely seems to be kind of like one of the undercurrents of this book that I felt was kind of like, that part wasn't really true to me, but I can understand where it comes from.